There's a word for people that get nostalgic even before any time has passed. It's like a phenomenon, and I sort of got that I would look at Bird, Parrish, and McHale, or Red, and very clearly see that there was going to be a time when they weren't going to be around. They weren't going to be playing basketball. Maybe they wouldn't even be on this earth. I had a sense of, I don't know if it's history but I thought this has got to be captured now.
Then you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
So we're all getting goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you made the pass, yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 34, and thanks for joining me. My website, inallairness.com, just add a / and the episode number to view show notes. On this episode, I'm pleased to welcome professional photographer, formerly 23 years with the Boston Celtics, Steve Lipofsky. Steve has been a professional photographer for well over 25 years. We talk about his entry into photography as a youngster, the early years he spent honing his skills, plus his wide-ranging experiences, including working with former and current presidents, Clinton and Obama. Some interesting stuff there for sure. Steve's work has also appeared in numerous publications worldwide, including Sports Illustrated and Time. We talk about those opportunities too. It's also interesting to learn about Steve's technical skills. He really opens up about the pros and cons of the pre-digital photography age and also the challenges of taking memorable photos. We discuss Steve's 23 years with the Boston Celtics as the official photographer. He started full-time in 1982 with the Celtics. He was also official photographer for the newly crowned 2013 World Series champion Boston Red Sox. There's also plenty of discussion about Boston's Big Three, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale and the Chief, Robert Parrish. Plus, we talk about Michael Jordan, Dr. J, Julius Erving, Magic Johnson, and, of course, the great Red Auerbach. 2 quick points to add some context to this chat. Near the end of the conversation, Steve asks about a photo of me. He's referring to my Skype profile picture. Secondly, we recorded this chat on Halloween night. It's celebrated here in some parts of Australia, but mostly in the USA and other countries. Towards the end of the episode, I've also got a stack of new listener feedback to share, so thanks very much for all who have contributed. Thanks, Steve, for availing yourself to chat with me. It was a great experience. Now, on to the show. My guest today has captured some of the most enduring images in NBA history. He was the official team photographer of the Boston Celtics for over 20 years, and his work is featured in Sports Illustrated, Time, and countless other magazines, books, and now digitally as well. Steve Lipofsky, thanks for joining me.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be with you, Adam.
It's great to be able to chat with you today. Now, I'd like to primarily talk about your basketball-related career today. However, before we do cover that, when did you first become interested in photography?
I was a kid. I was always fascinated with gadgets, and I was always very visual. And my dad was a really good photographer. It wasn't his full-time living. He was worked in electronics, but he was just a very good photographer and taught me the basics. And at one point, he put a second bathroom in our house, and that became a darkroom. And once that was a darkroom, I learned how to develop film and print black and white. And I think that makes a big difference for somebody who's going to get into photography. Like nowadays with digital, it's just really cool because you can print your own stuff pretty easily. It makes a big difference because the stuff that you shoot initially, even professionals like me, not always so great. It needs a little bit of work in Photoshop or the darkroom. Grew up on a little river near where we used to murder the British back during the Revolution. My models were turtles and frogs and snakes and ducks, and I pretty much chased them around until they got so tired that they would model for me in a fake natural way. Those were my early models, and my early action photos were like little animals running around.
I like that. With the storage of your photos, obviously there's a lot of things that can be archived and put digitally these days, but what do you do with all the bulk of your photos that you've taken over the whole expanse of your career?
Well, when I was shooting on film, and you figure that among just the Celtics alone, I shot 23 seasons. I was shooting every single home game, some of the away games, and all the early stuff was shot on color slide film. And, I'd be 300 shots a night anyway. At a certain point, I had an assistant working with me. And what happened was I just kept filling up file cabinets until, I had about 14 four-draw file cabinets full of color slides and then even more. So when I went to digital, it was either that or sleep outside and let the slides take over the whole house. Digital is the good thing about digital is it doesn't take much space to hold all the stuff. And the bad thing is that if you're not really careful, original photographs can disappear forever, blown up hard drive or whatever. It's you got to be prudent about how you store this stuff.
Researching for our chat today, I read that you've also photographed Presidents Clinton and Obama. Are you able to just elaborate a little bit on those opportunities that you had, Steve?
Actually, I even photographed Nixon once. When I was in school, I had a job with the Department of Justice in Washington part-time, and I went to the White House when he was receiving President Tito of Yugoslavia, because I'm half Yugoslavian, and took some pictures there. But the Clinton photographs, my cousin was involved in the National Kidney Foundation here, and he called me up and said, and I can tell by people's tone of voice when they want me to photograph something, but they're not going to pay me. Right. So I was getting that from my cousin. It was like, okay, just never mind how I am. I know you want me to do something. Just tell me. It was this function where he said President Clinton's going to be there. And I said, no, that sounds great. And I went because of what I do and all I've met just an awful lot of celebrities and athletes. And, so I'm not much of a, I don't get all squirmy or something, when I'm with somebody, but I still have a lot of respect for somebody like, the president. And he was an ex-president at the time. But I'll tell you that the most impressive thing about him was he may be the brightest person I've ever been in the presence of. This guy was just brilliant. I spent a lot of time with him while we were doing the photography and talking, and man, he spoke in front of this organization that was working against kidney disease, and no notes, no nothing. And, sometimes you hear these guys speak, whether they're celebrities or politicians, and, you can just fall asleep. You know that it's just a bunch of stuff. Then they're not sincere. They don't really know the subject. This was just the opposite. This guy was moving, knew what he was talking about, made it very personal, really, really impressive. Then the Obama situation, I moved from Boston up to New Hampshire a few years back, and I'm still in Boston all the time. But the thing about being in New Hampshire is that come every 4 years when these guys are running for office, you can't get out of your front door without whacking a presidential candidate in the side of the head. It's they're crawling all over the place. So sure enough, actually, it was a similar call. I have a good friend, and I got a call from him. And again, I can just tell in people's voice, they're going to want me to do something for nothing. They're not going to pay me, and I was getting that sense from him. And, it's like, hey, David, what? Just tell me what it is. And he says, well, this is during the primary. So he wasn't the president. He wasn't even the front runner. Hillary Clinton was the front runner. Mm-hmm. Said, well, we've got the candidate over here, and he's going to speak to a bunch of people. And would you mind very much coming over and taking some pictures? So I knew enough about him. I was interested, and I'm politically active. And I went over and actually spent the better part of a day with him and a bunch of other people. And man, he was just great. Just another very bright guy, very sincere, really interesting, and I had the opportunity to take all sorts of photographs of him and to get to know his staff a little bit, see some behind-the-scenes things, and met him again on another occasion, met his wife, and yeah, it was a nice connection to make. I heard back from them, and they were just really nice people, and it helps me, just as a citizen, to have that contact as I see all the troubles and problems, and I don't know, it gives me some confidence in the guy. Meeting somebody in person sometimes, as silly as it sounds, gives you a personal connection and makes you feel a little more secure about the people that are running things.
That makes perfect sense. Now, actually, I can hear myself echoing there. Sorry.
You sound fine to me. Do I sound okay?
Yeah, that's okay. I'm just hearing myself back in the echo.
Do you want? I can sing the Canadian national anthem for a sound check. Sadly, I have Australian friends. I don't know the Australian anthem.
Oh, okay. Maybe something you can learn, and if we do have the chance to perhaps chat again, you could belt out a chorus or two for us.
Yeah, perhaps at the end of the podcast, you and I can close with, we can harmonize on the anthem.
It sounds like it could be a plan. We'll see. We'll see what time limit is around it. If we've got time, we'll certainly try it. I'm just going to say, with Presidents Clinton and Obama, they obviously seem like very engaging characters, as you were describing, and I'm sure with all the subjects that you may photograph, it's quite important to try and establish some kind of rapport with them throughout the day or throughout the chance that you have to interact with them. So can you maybe just talk a bit about, even in regards to any of the subjects that you do photograph, how do you try and establish a good rapport with them to make the most of your opportunity to take photographs?
That's a really good point. One day years ago, I was kind of taking stock of what I did, and I think we all kind of second guess ourselves. And what are my skills? Am I any good at this? And I think one of the things I concluded was maybe even more important than all the technical skills, because I like the gadgetry. I feel like I've studied the craft pretty well, so that I know lighting and how the camera works and such. But whether it's the President of the United States or it's some friend, maybe has me come over and it's a family occasion for them, it's once in a lifetime for these people. And more often than not, you don't have a second chance to take these pictures. And I'm really cognizant of that. I mean, everything I do, I really give equal weight to. And, I've always been kind of a jokey, gregarious, sort of a wise guy type of a person. And I think that, and also I genuinely like people. I really do. I love meeting people. I like hearing about, who they are. I feel like I've had enough experience that, I can pretty quickly establish some kind of rapport with people for the most part. So that's the challenge, sometimes you don't have all afternoon to spend with somebody. Sometimes it's just a very few minutes. Sometimes it's almost seconds. In that very short space of time, you want to, and I don't know if you can describe it very well in words, but it becomes an instinctive thing that you make people feel comfortable, bring out an expression that they'd want to see, they're trusting you. And, I can see through the camera, you know what, this person's a good looking person, but they are not looking good right now. And I will work with them. And usually it takes a short space of time, but if I can see this is not working out, it is not working out, I will try anything. Maybe it's almost a little bit like improv or stand-up comedy a little bit, and the success isn't measured in the laughs, although you want to let people have a good time and leave them feeling happy, but it's the results of my work are right there on film, and they're there forever, so it's not like I can have a bad performance, because really I can't, because these people are going to be stuck. If I were to not do a good job, people are going to be stuck with that forever. There's pressure, but I like that. I need the pressure in order to perform.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Now, getting into photography, taking photos of the Boston Celtics, how did that first come about?
Well, I'll throw in a minute of background to get you there. After working at a lot of different professions and jobs and such, and going to school for political science, I thought, I love film and I think I want to do film. So I said, well, I think the first step is to get to be a really good still photographer. So I went to work at some of the color labs in Boston, Massachusetts, and met a guy who knew somebody, because in Boston, the way it works is you got to know somebody. It's not how good you are, how smiley you are. It's, somebody, a connection. So this guy got me down to some Celtics games, and I'm taking pictures, and they were awful, but I was enjoying it. And then I kind of lost that connection. And one day I said, gee, I'd like to get back down the floor and take some pictures again. So I asked around and just did the silliest, had the silliest approach. I somehow wound up in the office of the assistant general manager. Now, I should have been talking to a PR guy or a media guy or somebody like that, but I'm there with the assistant general manager, who makes all the big deals. He was the attorney for the team. And I'm showing him pictures of cows looking at their reflections in ponds and sunsets in Vermont, and some of the best of my slightly crummy action photographs that I had taken of the Celtics. And over the course of many, many years, he's become one of my dearest friends. His name is Jan Volk. Well, I lucked out because Jan actually is a very talented photographer. I didn't know that at the time. So, he had this Celtic exterior, which is, a lot of pride and like a kind of an arrogance, but in a good way. So he's saying, well, I'll tell you, if we got one of these games that's not very popular, maybe we'll let you in sometime. And he told me something I keep telling him, I've thrown back in his face thousands of times. He said, photographers around here are a dime a dozen. So, I bugged him a little. I got into a game. They happened to be shooting the team photograph that day. So I just shot it along with everybody else. And I really hustled. I developed the film. I made prints. I got them prints back the very next day. And they were impressed. They were like, it's like the prettiest girl in school sometimes doesn't get asked out. And, because everybody assumes that she's all, full of dates and popular. And like with the Celtics, at least back then, nobody was really trying very hard to be the team photographer. There was a guy who became a dear friend of mine who'd been with him for years, but he wasn't exactly doing the team photography. I don't know what he was doing. So anyway, one thing led to another, and I started to come into more games. I did whatever needed to be done. I really got to be friends with the people in the office. They've become very long-term, very dear friends of mine. I think before that season was even over, I think I was the Celtics photographer. Kind of learned on the job. Action photography it's a little difficult and challenging. And I think basketball photography, it's a tough one. It's pretty tough, and the lighting is difficult indoors. But, there's some expression about enough monkeys at enough typewriters will create Shakespeare. So I took enough pictures, and I am pretty critical, and I'm not stupid, so, I figured, well, I got to get better. And after a while, I got to be pretty good at it.
That's a great backstory there. I really enjoyed that one. The 1982 season, was that your first full season working for the Celtics?
Yeah, my first full season was the 81-82 season. I had gone to games before that. I had, even back in the 70s, and I have a terrible memory. I don't remember my dad bringing me in as a kid. I would have watched the games on TV, but that was my first full season.
That 1982 season, Boston had the best record in the NBA, 63-19, and made it to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, losing to Dr. J and the Philadelphia 76ers. Can you please just talk about your experiences in that first season?
It was, you're supposed to start at the bottom, and I started at the top. I mean, they were the world champions. They were, at that point already, arguably one of the greatest teams ever, and they were only going to get better. And great bunch of guys. I mean, Kevin McHale, his dad was a miner, his mom, and his family, just the nicest, most decent people, and Kevin was just, everybody gives him a hard time because he can't stop talking, but in a good way. I mean, he's just like, after the games, you're chatting with him, and he's telling you stories, and, Robert Parrish, who's like a big, imposing, guy, actually was very funny, had a great sense of humor. It was a nice cast of characters, and the best part was Red Auerbach himself. Whether you go into a restaurant or a hardware store or a government, stuff comes down from the top, I think. I think that, people take the cue and they behave, they're influenced by the guy at the top, and that was Red. And Red was just exactly who you want him to be, just a guy who you knew that he loved you, but he yelled. And he was gruff on the outside, and he was could not be more decent. And that was one of the great things. It's like I told you before, I'm not a real celebrity guy, but getting to know Red, it's like getting to know Franklin Roosevelt, or I don't know, President Lincoln or somebody. He's a historical figure. He's larger than life. And then one of the nice things is that, when you go to school, when you're, any age, but especially like, I kind of think of high school, like our grades where we're, 14, 15, 16. Well, one of the cool things about school is you go in, you see all your friends every day, and you hang out, and it's just really nice to see them. And that's part of working at the old Boston Garden, that you come in and there's the security guard, there's the people that sell the drinks, there's the people that do the work to break down the parquet floor, the team doctor, people that most people don't know, never get a chance to meet, but they're your pals and your friends. And it really, it's corny, but it really is like a big family.
Well, clearly you've got some incredible lifelong memories there from your time spent with the Celtics. Speaking of Red, there is a fantastic photo that you took where Red Auerbach is up in the rafters of the old Boston Garden. You can see the championship banners behind him, and then underneath that you can also see the parquet floor of Boston Garden. It's just a great shot. Do you mind talking a little bit about how that photo came to be?
Yeah, there's a word for people that get nostalgic even before any time has passed. It's like a phenomenon, and I sort of got that I would look at like Bird, Parrish, and McHale or Red and very clearly see that there was going to be a time when they weren't going to be around. They weren't going to be playing basketball. Maybe they wouldn't even be on this earth. And I had a sense of, I don't know if it's history but I thought this has got to be captured now. And so that shot of Red is one of those that we didn't have any reason to shoot it. It's like normally, the team photographer or the company photographer, whoever you are, they'll say, hey, we're going to do a poster. We need to do this. We need to do that. But I would go to the Celtics a few times, like with this picture of Red, with a picture I took of Bird, Parrish, and McHale with the trophies, with the starting five, you add Ainge and Dennis Johnson, and I'd say, this photo's got to be taken. We've got to get this photo of Red, and I thought, well, what do you do with Red? Well, his home, his shrine, is the Boston Garden, so it's got to show the Boston Garden. He's responsible for all of those championships, so those banners up above are emblematic of that, and the Celtic parquet floor it's part of that whole package, so I was like, okay, well, it's got to be in the Garden. He's obviously got to have a cigar, but you don't have to ask Red to have a cigar because he's always got one with him. So I set the thing up, and like a lot of these shots, it's a little bit tricky. The lighting is a little bit tricky, and you don't want to make any mistakes. But also, one thing about a lot of these athletes, and Red more than anybody, is you don't have a lot of time. Like with Red, I'd be shooting the team photograph, and you set all these guys up, and it takes forever, and you're doing the lighting. And after I'd taken just a few photographs, and this would happen every year, Red would say, all right, you got enough. And that was it. That was the end of it. So when I'm setting up something like the Red photograph, I will have stand-ins. So I'll have somebody else standing up there, like the picture that you're talking about. Well, there's the same picture, but the subject is going to be a short blonde woman or some kid or somebody. I put stand-ins in until I was satisfied that everything was good. And back then, before digital, what you did was you'd put a Polaroid back on your camera. And you take the picture and you count the 30 seconds or the 60 seconds, and you look at the Polaroid and say, "Oh, okay, I think I got it. I think it's okay." And so after a few of those, I knew I had the shot. It's like there was a shot I did of Bird, Parrish, and McHale at Hellenic College, which is where they practiced. And that's an Eastern Orthodox church. And I don't know if you're familiar with what the priests look like there, but there are these guys with long black robes and long black beards. So I set up that shot for about a week because I knew I was only going to have about 10 minutes with those guys before they were going to start squirming and, wanting to run off like little kitties. So I've got these really cool shots where I took four of the, actually this was my shot of the starting five. I took five of these priests, and I've got them standing with the championship trophies and basketballs, long black robes and beards. It's really pretty cool.
It sounds pretty awesome. So that could be the alternate starting five.
Yeah. Well, they look kind of like the Red Sox look this year with all their beards.
That's true. They were rocking a lot of beards, that 2013 World Series team. Now, talking about that photo of Red, obviously it's one of the many fantastic ones that you've taken. It's obviously a photo that's steeped in history, as you described as well. So you've just got some really iconic photos which have obviously lasted the test of time and will continue to for many more decades to come, I'm sure. Now, from about 1984 to 1987, the Celtics made it to 4 straight NBA finals, and they won the title in 84 and 86. This 2014 NBA season will be the 30th anniversary of the 84 championship. Do you consider that mid-80s run that the Celtics had, would that be the highlight of your time with the Celtics?
Well, it may have been, but not necessarily because of the success. It was kind of odd. I sort of started at the top, and every year it seemed like I would be going to the finals, certainly deep into the playoffs. Actually, a little side thing is, one year we were eliminated in the first round. We were swept by Milwaukee. All of a sudden, I had the summer off, and I thought, wow, this is actually kind of cool. So I always want the team to do to win a championship, and I get excited about it, and I love the team. But there was a side benefit when those years when we started to not do so well. I had a lot more time to myself. But the cool thing about that run in the 80s was, the success was pretty neat, and it allowed me to spend a lot of time in Los Angeles and Houston and make a lot of friends out there. And when you're the Celtics photographer, the team gives you a kind of a reflected prestige that you wouldn't have if you were working somewhere else or working for a different team or working for a high school or a college. So it opens a lot of doors. When that success that the team had there, well, through no accomplishment of my own, it allowed me to pretty much do anything I wanted without having to show my work. And also, when the police would stop you, you would just, you kind of accidentally show your Celtic ID, and we'll just let you go. You just go on with your business. But actually, none of this has to do with basketball now that I think of it. I mean, one of the cool things about those years was the atmosphere. It's like Casey Jones, the coach, for a lot of those years, was the mellowest, nicest, most decent. He set the tone. I mean, what a hell of a guy. Easygoing. And again, you had that crew of McHale and Parrish and Bird and just a neat bunch of jokers, funny. You go on the road with those guys, and it's like during the finals, and we're all in some bar somewhere. And Casey Jones, who I don't know if everybody's aware of it, beautiful singing voice. Invariably, we're all hanging out, and Casey, there'll be some piano player there or something. Casey will get the mic and just rip off a bunch of songs, Georgia, a bunch of other things. And man, it's like if they were the worst team on the face of the earth, that still would have been an absolute golden time, to be around, and the success was just frosting on the cake. They were just real good guys, and not just the people that you knew, but the Todd Rosenzweig, who was the vice president in charge of marketing, and Jan Volk, the general manager, Stephen Riley, tickets, names that if you're a Bostonian, you may know these guys, but most people don't, and they're part of the heart and soul of the team, and they call themselves Sons of Red sometimes because they were lifers with the Celtics, and Red brought them in, and just a great, decent, funny bunch of people. Nice bunch of guys to hang out with. And I know that this will be offensive to you as an Australian, but we'd occasionally drink. There would be evenings of sometimes even a little too much alcohol, but we all made it through, and it was just a blast. I mean, even now, whenever I get together with these people, and I do, there's still stories, that nobody's ever heard before, and we're not adverse to repeating some of the older ones.
Yeah, that's awesome, and you've put it into some great perspective there. I was lucky enough to be at Boston Garden for one game. It was in 1994, a regular season game in January of 94. The Big Three had since disbanded. Bird had retired by this stage, but still it even felt like an event at that stage. I can only imagine how it must have felt as the crowd began to file into the Boston Garden throughout the 1980s.
You couldn't hear. You absolutely couldn't hear. And you were talking about, I think it was the 82 season, and you can fact check me because it sounds like you actually remember more about the details than I do, but I think that was the season that Philadelphia beat us in the Eastern Finals. Around these parts, there's a chant, "Beat LA," that's become historical. But what a lot of people don't know is that chant started when the Sixers were beating us in the final game, and they were going to go on and play the Lakers. And the people in the Garden always had tremendous respect for Dr. J and the Sixers. And maybe the most exciting single moment I ever experienced in sports was that losing game when the game was clearly out of reach, and everybody in that building stood up and cheered on the Philadelphia 76ers, and that's when they said beat LA. They wanted Philadelphia to beat Los Angeles in the finals, and it just made your hair stand on end. It was absolutely thrilling and just really, really cool. I mean, that crowd loved Julius Erving, and many years later when he retired and Red gave him a piece of the parquet, you could see that it was reciprocated. He was just a hell of a guy.
Yeah. In those NBA entertainment videos that were released in the 1980s, they do show some of the game footage where you can then hear the Boston crowd chanting "Beat LA." So it's great to hear some of the backstory behind that and how it actually came about.
When Philadelphia was in the building and Dr. J was there were these two super fans, Rita and Joanne. And from the time they were kids, they went to these games. And they made up all these banners that you'd see all over the building. They were all like hand done, and they'd say different things. Well, there were these banners that, now that I think of it, I don't know who made them up, but they would hang from the first balcony. And when the Big Three were at their peak, well before they were ever in the Hall of Fame, people did these real homemade jerseys, with the number 33 on it, and with a 00, and with a 32 for Kevin. And they would hang that over the balcony, and everybody knew that it meant, well, these guys are going to go to the Hall of Fame. Well, whenever Irving would come in, and only then, you'd see a fourth little sheet go up that they had made up the same way, but it was in red instead of the green, and it was a number 6, which was a tribute to Irving, that they had such respect for him that they put him right up there with our Big Three.
That's great to hear. I love hearing this sort of stuff, and I'm sure that everyone listening would just almost have the hairs on the back of their neck raised there if they're a diehard fan like myself and like you, no doubt. Thank you for sharing that. Was anything off limits in terms of taking photos around players and personnel?
Yeah. This is an old-fashioned traditional organization, and, well, one thing that was off limits was you just couldn't get into the locker room. I think eventually I finally made it in there, but it was really sacrosanct. It was, I would go into the locker room before or after every single game, but I mean while the coach was actually talking to the players. This was stuff that I really wanted to do because I felt like it needed to be documented historically, and I probably wasn't pushy enough about doing it. I just kind of went with the flow. Oh, also, there was one time when the team doctor, Larry Bird, had foot surgery, and he was walking around in casts for a while. So the team doctor, Arnie Scheller, who was just a terrific doctor and also an Army Ranger. This guy used to parachute behind the lines in wartime while he was the Celtic team doctor. I mean, this guy, you could do a comic book or a movie about him. He's such an amazing guy. So anyway, he said, "Hey, Steve, would you go in to the locker room and take some pictures of Larry's casts?" I said, "Sure." So I'm in there doing that, and I'm looking through the lens when I get this whap on the back of my head, and it was Larry. He's just like, "What the hell are you doing?" And Larry's a very private person, and he's like, I knew right away. He says, "Well, he doesn't want anybody to." He had no idea that the team doctor had asked me to do that. So yeah, and then one time there was a player that not one of the big superstars, but Joe Klein, big center. Just a hell of a guy. He was one of the people that we socialized with a lot and a real good guy. And so Joe got traded to Chicago, and one game he had come in, and we're out on the floor before the game, and hey, how you doing? Where are you now? And so we wanted to exchange, our contact information. So he said, well, look, I'm going to be in the locker room in a few minutes, so meet me there before the game. I said, sure. So I walk into the locker room, and this is the Chicago Bulls locker room, and sitting by the door is Michael Jordan. And he's like, what are you doing in here? And I said, well, I'm here to see Joe Klein. Get the hell out of here. So I didn't take it personally, and they have that's not a knock on Michael or anything. But you can't. I had pretty good access to just about everything all the time, but not 100%. Now and again, you just don't get into places. I mean, I could have been selling naked pictures of the basketball players, but I think that would have made for kind of a short-lived career.
I can imagine.
In the first round of the 1986 NBA playoffs at Boston Garden, you took the only known photo of Michael Jordan's record-breaking jumper as he eclipsed Elgin Baylor's all-time single-game scoring high of 61 points. MJ went for 63 in that classic double OT game. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Do you remember the moment, or do looking back at the photos do that for you?
I do remember it fairly well. I remember that there are lots of games that are less important than that one, and lots of milestones that are less important than that one, but I'm still counting the points. Or when you're a reporter or a team photographer, you have access to this media guide. And I don't mean the little booklet that they come out with before the season. It's all glossy. That's nice. But what I mean are the game notes. So that back then, a guy named Jeff Twiss, who's still with the Celtics, he would get his staff together. And, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to a game and you pick these things up, but they are a freaking encyclopedia. I mean, they're all just sort of Xeroxed and stapled together. It's just a bunch of loose pages. But in those notes, you're going to see an 8-year-old kid could write a pretty good article about that game using the information in that guide. It's going to give you every statistic, any record that may be coming up in that game, any small thing of interest you can even imagine, little things, big things, biographies. Like with any game, I pick up the game notes and I see that, okay, Jordan's got a chance to break the record this game. So I was keeping track, and you can do that, but it doesn't mean you're going to get the photograph. So there is a matter of luck involved, and then there's another element that makes it a little bit more difficult, and that is that when I shoot inside a building like that, and especially at that point in the Boston Garden, in order to take Sports Illustrated quality photographs, I have to be tied into a strobe system, which means that there are hugely powerful strobe lights up in the ceiling of the building. So when I take a picture, and back in the old days, I mean, it was actually a cord. I would have to climb up to the ceiling of that building, which, did you see King Kong?
Yes, I have.
Do you remember when the crewmen were walking across that big log and King Kong was shaking them off the log?
Yeah, I do.
Well, that's what that catwalk was like up at the roof of Boston Garden. You know, it was like any moment now, a giant rat could start shaking that thing and you'd fall down. And before every game and after every game, I'd have to go up and drop those cords and pick the cords up. Anyway, I digress. But so what's happening is I'm sitting down there on the floor trying to get that shot, trying to get every shot Michael Jordan made. When I take a picture, those strobe lights go off. Well, it takes almost 3.5 seconds for those lights to recycle. That means that I can't take another picture for 3.5 seconds. Now, 3.5 seconds between bites, if you're eating a steak, maybe not so bad. But when you're in the middle of action like that, and you have to wait 3.5 seconds, it means you really have to pick your spots. Like, as a comparison, cameras today and even back then, you could shoot 8 frames in 1 second. In 1 second, you could take 8 pictures. Well, I have to wait, count 3.5 seconds and imagine basketball action going on. And so if I make my shot, and then he takes the award-winning shot, I'm screwed. And that's one reason why I'm the only one to have that shot. It's not that there weren't a lot of other great photographers or that they were great. I'm not necessarily great. But the odds are against you getting a particular shot. There's a little bit of timing involved.
That's fantastic, hearing the backstory behind that and just the work that goes into actually hoping to take the shot that becomes an iconic moment. And, yeah, great stuff there to hear all the behind-the-scenes there. Thanks for sharing that. Now, you mentioned Sports Illustrated. You've had 2 of your photos that have appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated over the years. Do you mind perhaps just detailing a little bit about how they came about and how it feels to have a photo that you've taken, so to have your life's work immortalised on such an important and widely recognised sporting magazine?
Yeah, when you're a kid, or if you're somebody that is, an amateur photographer, it's really cool to see your name in print and to get your picture in the local paper. I mean, a photograph you've taken. I still like that, but, when you're shooting the Celtics at the peak of their success, you get a lot of photographs published. And it's not, I don't know, maybe you get a little jaded, but one thing that the magic doesn't wear off of is getting a significant photograph in Sports Illustrated. And I've had a number of photographs in the magazine, but that first cover was just such a freaking cool moment. It was the '86 finals, and I was in Houston, and the way it worked was, even though I was the Celtics photographer, I have always been independent, which is to say I own all of those pictures myself. And I have the opportunity my first duty, is to take care of the Celtics and get them everything they need. But that still allows me to, in the case like that, with the '86 finals, I would be working with the editors at Sports Illustrated, and back then it was color slide film. So I would be sending my undeveloped film right to Sports Illustrated. I wouldn't even see it. They would develop it, look at it, send me back everything. If there was anything that they liked, they would scan it, keep it back at the magazine. So, I had no idea I was in contention for a cover. I had no idea what I had even taken. So I was in the hospitality suite that the NBA runs. And the hospitality suite, again, I know that the people in Australia are kind of a chaste and temperate lot. And some of them may want to turn down this broadcast because there was drinking going on. And I know you guys find that objectionable. So we're all kind of probably half loaded in the hospitality suite on the NBA's dime. And a call came in, and hey, Lipofsky, the Sports Illustrated's calling for you. Here, go take it in the bathroom, because there was a phone in there. And I get the call, and it's like, oh man, you got a cover. Or actually, what you hear is not that you have the cover, but you're being considered for the cover. So sometimes you never even know that, but if they need to ask you some questions, the way the process works is they look at all these pictures, And then they make up, at least back then when they had color slides, they'd make up one of these big slide carousels like you'd show your home movies on. Mm-hmm. And then a bunch of editors sit down and look at the thing. And then they pull out some pictures. And then they look at them again, and they look at them again. And you make a cut and another cut and another cut. It's almost like some kind of championship in itself or a beauty contest. And then if you make it through all that, you got the cover. And I was just really excited. And the first thing I did was to call my mom. Because my mom, to her dying day, was like, can't you get a nice job like your friend Joe, who works for state government? Like, she never quite fully got what I did or thought it was real work. So I said, Mom, I'm on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And she perked up a little bit, which was good, until I had to explain to her that it's not my face that was going to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It was going to be Larry Bird. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, that's very nice. So... it was really cool. And then years later, I had a shot that I took in the 85 NBA Finals. It was Magic and Larry. It was a shot I really liked. The two of them kind of twined around each other. So I got a call in 2008 when the Lakers and the Celtics were going to face each other again in the finals. And they were asking me questions about that photo and exactly when it was taken. And I'm like, well, what's up? Well, we're considering using it as the cover. So even though it was 2008, they wound up using my photo from 1985 on the cover, and aside from the fact that it's just great to get a cover, the really cool thing about that shot was they put it on page, but it didn't fill the page like their pictures usually do. They put it in a slide mount with all the writing on it and stuff, and in fact, they called me kind of apologetically and said, look, normally we would put your credit, on the table of contents, but can we omit that? I mean, we're going to put your name on the cover on the slide mount. Well, I don't know if anybody has ever had that before or since. Maybe they have, but not to my knowledge. And I said, yeah, you can do that. And it just a really cool, unexpected moment. And also, I just really loved the art of how the editor presented the photograph. They did a really nice job.
The title was The Greatest Rivalry Returns. And obviously to have your work shown on the front of the Sports Illustrated cover, yeah, there must be some fantastic memories for sure. Now, some of my favourite photos that you've taken, they appear to be like hours before a game's actually started. It might be a shoot-around session or a practice session before the crowd even files into the arena. The players are either a picture of concentration or conversely they're completely at ease and they're seemingly oblivious to your camera. Can you just describe your approach to taking those photos of the true superstars like Bird, Dr. J, Magic, and Jordan?
Yeah, in fact, I'll plug myself. I'm working on a book that may be called Boston Garden from Where I Sat. And part of the point of the book is that there are an awful lot of photographs that I took that no one has ever seen, because when the demand for photos by magazines, for publicity, it's usually the action shots, somebody at the peak of shooting or competition between a couple of guys. But the kind of shots you're talking about, I took all the time. And it didn't have to be a first-rate player, although, I knew enough to know that, hey, anytime Bird and Magic Johnson or Bird and Julius Erving are anywhere near one another, no matter what they're doing, I should take that picture. But also, I've got a picture of Bird lying down on a curb with his hat over his eyes and he's kind of sleeping. I love that stuff. I like the stuff away from the court, the behind-the-scenes stuff. It's a matter of you're always looking. It's like, very briefly, I was the doorman at a bar, which is like being the bouncer, even though that's not my nature. And you find that you're always looking at the crowd differently than if you were a patron. You're looking for trouble about to develop. And that's a little bit like, I think, what a good photographer will do is, it could be a Celtics game, it could be a picnic. It doesn't, you're scanning and looking for something that you have to sort of defeat the urge to think that just because something is an interesting real-life moment, it'll make a good photograph. Because it won't necessarily. This kid's really happy, this is going on, or this event just happened. It's not that. It's it can be very quiet stuff. I remember that I was, the day after Aquino was assassinated in the Philippines, Time magazine sent me out to photograph his family, which I was not looking forward to. But it turns out they were gracious and wonderful, invited all of us in for Chinese food. And I had my eye on the kids, and when they weren't out thanking us for how good, not me personally, but they liked how the press had been so supportive of their cause, I'm looking off in the corner, and then I see one of the daughters crying. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but it was a moment I just felt like had to be recorded. And, at the Boston Garden, it's like that whole place is my studio. It's that I know what the lighting is in every little nook and cranny. Yeah, when there's nobody around, when you have those moments that are not the typical moments, it's personally rewarding to me to photograph those, even though they may never see the light of day, some of those things.
Wonderful answer. And it would be fantastic if that book does see the light of day. Just be great to see some of the photos that you've got in your extensive archives. Just a few more quick questions for you, Steve. You've been very generous with your time today. I really appreciate it. It's been awesome having a chance to chat with you. Larry Bird's retirement ceremony, for me, your defining photo of that occasion is the one where Larry holds open Magic's warm-up jacket and we see a Celtics t-shirt underneath. How are your memories of that day and those moments?
Well, this is why I love digital photography and feel like it's extending my lifespan, because that night was film, was not digital. And like with, like I said before, that look, it doesn't matter if it's a little kid's event or Larry Bird's retirement. For the people involved, it's once in a lifetime for them, and that is true. But on the other hand, if you mess up Larry Bird's retirement night, it's just not good. It's just not at all good. So even though there's almost always pressure on me to get it right the first time, this was one where, especially back then, you know what? I think I'd always have a little bit of anxiety before an event, and that was probably a good thing. And I had a little anxiety before this thing, and not least of which because the lighting was going to be crazy. They weren't going to use the regular lights. I couldn't use those strobe lights I was talking about. There were going to be spotlights. So it was going to be very hit or miss as to if I could get this stuff to come out. So I went in early. I'd go to the rehearsals and the lighting rehearsals, and you're yelling over at the light guy, and is this how it's going to be when this happens, and at what time are they going to do this? You're out there with a light meter, and you're taking readings, and you're making a mental map in your head, and it's like a combination of a map and a score for a musical where, okay, at this time, this light is going to go on here. This is how bright it's going to be, so I think I need to set my camera this way. So technically, it's very challenging. And that's, not even talking about the fact that while this stuff is going on, you want to capture the moment. And it's not anything we would have thought twice about back then, but there's no such thing as autofocus. I mean, we're manually focusing this stuff. So there's a technical challenge just to get the shot to come out. And then again, you're like anticipating what's going to happen. So a lot of things have to come out right to get decent stuff. So I'm shooting away, and because it's not digital, I don't know what I've gotten. I know what I saw. I know that I saw something really cool that everybody in the crowd, their jaw dropped when Larry pulled open the warm-up jacket, and we all thought that was a really cool moment. But was there even a photograph? Well, back then, the process was I would, after the event, take my film. I probably had 15, 20 rolls of film. I would bring it to the color lab. Then I would be, have to wait for them to open up in the morning, and I'd be on the phone to them. And nowadays, with digital cameras, if it's a little bit dark, you can just adjust the camera. Well, back then, you put your roll of film in, and you're kind of stuck with it. But what you could do is, and this is probably the kind of boring technical part, you could push or pull the film to make the picture lighter or darker if you're shooting in a kind of a challenging lighting situation. So what I would do is I'd call up the lab and say, do a clip test. Well, what that means is in total darkness, they'll pull out some of my film, cut it with a scissor, and then develop it, and then look at it, and then we have a conversation about whether it needs to be adjusted further. Well, that's well and good. The problem is that cut that you make right in the middle, that could be the best photograph you'll ever take in your life. And now it has a slice right up the middle of it and it's useless. But it's a gamble that you take. So anyway, after all of that, I finally get the pictures back. I can't remember if I got them first or they went to Sports Illustrated or what happened, but I'm looking through the slides. I said, oh man, I think I got something here. Sure enough, that picture wound up being a double-page spread in Sports Illustrated. It's not like I knew it. It's more like, oh man, this is a pleasant surprise. But then mixed in with that is the competitiveness. I love the guys I shoot with. They're my dear friends. But I look at that magazine, especially Sports Illustrated, and if I didn't get a shot and somebody else did, I'm like, man, and I'm really hard on myself about it. But that was a really gratifying moment.
You must be like a kid on Christmas morning, I guess, waiting at that time before all this new advanced technology comes along, just waiting to get back what you've taken and what shots have actually come out. So it must have been equal parts exciting, but then just hoping that the right photos come out for you.
It's almost like, are you going to die during an operation? And then when you realize you don't die, meaning that the pictures didn't turn out all black, that, and now you're nominated for an Academy Award. It's like you go from a lot of anxiety about whether anything came out at all to being elated. But then that only lasts about 4 minutes and 20 seconds before you're on to the next project and all the anxiety returns again. So there's not usually a lot of basking in the afterglow because you're on to the next thing and you're only as good as the next thing that you're going to shoot.
Yeah, understandable. Now, you're also friends with and you've worked alongside an upcoming guest of my podcast, Roland Lazenby. Can you please talk a little bit about your friendship with Roland and your involvement together around the NBA? Yeah.
Do you guys call it high school there? What do you call it when you're like 16, 17 and in school?
Yep, high school, that's it.
Okay. Well, it's like high school. I mean, you go to the games and you see your pals, and Roland is definitely one of those. Just a dear friend and a character in his own right. I mean, we're all a little bit screwy, and Roland's just an absolute joy. And generally when we're getting together, there's a little alcohol involved. And so, we'd be at the finals or wherever we were and say, hey, Roland, hey, Steve, what are you up to? But one of the cool things about Roland is you talk about prolific. I mean, this guy just writes. And the American writer, Dorothy Parker, somebody said, do you like writing? And she said, I like having written. Maybe it's different for somebody as professional as him, but man, writing to me is a tough racket, and Roland is just superb. I mean, he has written so many books and articles, and one of the nice things is that he's just real generous. And to this day, I get calls from Roland, and hey, Steve, I'm working on this book, and what do you got for photos? And so over the years, we've worked on so many different things together. I never got into this for the money. There are other things I could have done to make a lot more money, but for the experience of it and to be with people that I want to be with. And Roland is definitely one of those people that just a dear friend, and I have the luck. Well, it's not luck. I planned it this way. Of the people I work with are my friends. I don't have to work with anybody unless I really like them, and Roland's just terrific.
I'm excited to chat with him in an upcoming episode too, so I look forward to speaking with him about his career to date as well. Now, this is a silly question perhaps, but I'll ask anyhow. Do you have an all-time favourite photo that you've taken, or just not possible to choose one?
Yeah, I don't know that I exactly have that, but one of the photos that means a real lot to me is there's a photographer, Karsh, that photographed Einstein and Franklin Roosevelt and just everybody. And one day I was listening to some interview that he did, I don't know when, and he said something really simple, but it struck me. He said, as a photographer, you're taking a picture of somebody, especially a portrait, you're photographing their reaction to you. they're looking at you. This is the response you've elicited, and we touched on that a little bit before. Well, there's a photograph. There was a draft one year where the Celtics, draft the new players, and Red Auerbach was up on a stage, and as I always didn't matter how many photos I'd taken of Red, I would watch him like a hawk for anything that he was doing. And so I have a series of photographs I took of him, probably up on my website, but there's 3 photos. He's smoking his cigar, and then he starts to turn a little bit. But the photo that means the most to me, he's looking right into the camera with just a smile and this great expression, but it's meant for me. Red turns and he saw me, and that was the look that he was giving to me, and I know that look is for me. And that's one of my very favorite photos.
Oh, that's great to hear that, and I appreciate you opening up and talking about some of these very fond memories I'm sure that are existing within you. So the last thing I will say, you've just mentioned your website there. Can you just provide the website details about what is available to access online for listeners of the show that would like to check out much more of your great work, Steve?
Yeah, it's always changing, and there's always going to be a lot of new stuff added. But what I do is I've just got tens of thousands of pictures of just about every NBA player you can think of, mostly between 1981 and 2004. And it's Bird and Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. So those pictures are all up there on the website. And then I've got some of my baseball. I shot for the Red Sox for a few years. And then there's some advice on taking pictures. And then there's what I sort of laughingly refer to, or immodestly, as my fine artwork, because, I shoot scenic stuff. Like I'll shoot and sort of art photography and abstractions. So there's like leaves and pictures that I showed to the Celtic general manager by mistake, but I think I'm doing a little bit better now. It's just all full of stuff, and I'm adding more and more stories, and and maybe a lot more personal stuff as time goes on. But mainly, I just want to emphasize that whether you wanted to buy something or not, if there's something that people want or something that means a lot to them and they don't see it there, just shoot me an email and I'll see if I can drag it out of the archives.
Sounds wonderful. The website address, and I'll include it in the links to the show today, but it's lipofsky.com, or you can also access it via another website address. Is that correct?
Yeah. If you don't want to go through the aggravation of remembering how to spell Lipofsky, but it is like the 3 words, lip of sky, like the lip on your mouth of sky, look up at the sky. You can either Google that and I'll come right up, or basketball photo, just singular, basketball photo, and I'm www.basketballphoto.com. So it'll come up either way. Well, why not help to ensure my immortality by memorizing how to spell Lipofsky? It may come up sometime.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's how I remembered to spell it when I was coming up with the research for the chat today. I thought, hang on, I can break this down into 3 separate words. So that was exactly how I remembered it. So that's a good way to recall how to spell your name.
Geez, I didn't even realize that until, I was probably 20 or something. So you're a lot brighter than I was.
I'm not sure about that, but I appreciate the
Adam,
comment.
if I can ask you a question, what's that boar in the background? There's a wild boar in the background of your photograph. Is that a bar?
Oh, yeah, that's at a place called Hog's Breath Cafe. It was taken up in a place called Port Douglas in northern Queensland in Australia, at a restaurant called Hog's Breath Cafe. So it's probably, from the background of some of the things I had on display at the restaurant.
Yeah, do you do all your work at bars?
No, I don't. I did back when I was a bit younger, but these days I'm quite mild-mannered.
Because, maybe I got a bad view or something, but all the Australians I had met when I was in school, they had like 100 different expressions for throwing up. It kind of told me something about the culture, that I think there's a lot of drinking there.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. So okay. Australia does have a culture and a reputation of being quite big drinkers and enjoying the social side of things. So you're exactly correct there.
Yeah, well, I absolutely cannot wait to visit, because really, like anybody I've ever met who'd come over here from Australia, it's just been so much fun. And then just all the wacky marsupials you have there. I really can't wait to come and visit.
Yeah, we've got some interesting wildlife that you can have a look at as well. So hopefully if you do make a visit over to our shores, I'd love to have a chance to meet up with you at some stage. But I really appreciate the time you've given me today, Steve. You've been very generous. We didn't even chat about how long that we might be talking for, but it's gone over an hour to this point. So you've been really generous, and I've thoroughly enjoyed every second of it. So thanks again for chatting with me.
Adam, I really enjoyed this, and I appreciate you letting me take care of the trick-or-treaters before we made the call. I've been coming off one of the busiest 3 weeks I've had in about a year and a half. Please send me a wish list of any players that you want, and I'm happy to provide you photographs of whatever you can use.
Oh, that's really kind of you, and I'd love to do that, because for each of the people that I've chatted with as far as guests, I'd really enjoy adding a photo that you've taken to have as the featured image from each of those different episodes. So I'll certainly add a credit to every photo that you provide, and yeah, that'd be much appreciated. So thanks again, Steve.
Yeah, and if it's not too much trouble, you could possibly name one of your kids after me.
By your surname or first name?
Lipofsky Ryan.
Yeah, that sounds all right.
Yeah, good.
Has a nice flow to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
That's excellent. So it's been, a real treat, no pun intended, with Halloween.
Okay, I'll look forward to hearing it.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Thanks again, Steve. It was great to chat with you. I encourage you to interact with the show. You can suggest topics for future episodes or guests that you'd like to hear conversations with. I welcome your voicemail comments or questions on my website or Facebook page. Since last episode, a flurry of great iTunes feedback has been received. Thanks to George von Strauss, aka Marcelino from Twitter. Thank you very much, mate. Harrison Highland and Aaron_414. Pretty sure that's not your real name. For your excellent iTunes reviews, recently added to the USA store. A good friend of mine, Ross Franco, also updated his review from late last year. So thank you for your kind words again and support of the show, Ross. Richard Cole, via the Canadian iTunes store, added a stellar review also. Thank you very much, Richard. If you have a few minutes and you'd like to check out some of these reviews, please do. There's some fantastic comments in there, and a couple of times people have suggested that the Michael Jordan interview is imminent. So we'll see what happens with that. I just love doing the podcast, so it's fantastic to get this feedback, and all the feedback I receive just makes me want to do this even more and more. So thanks again for the support. Worldwide, the show currently has 22 reviews, and now it's got 27 5-star ratings, so that's just fantastic. If you add a review, I'd also love to mention your name in a future episode of the show. Your ratings and reviews are like a sweet Rod Strickland no-look pass. That's the ultimate assist. It helps me reach a wider audience for the podcast, and in turn, it gives you, the listener, more opportunity to hear conversations with great guests. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes, or you can simply add my RSS feed. Check out the right-hand sidebar of my website. You can hear the show on Stitcher, Player FM, and other podcatchers. It's also available on the Windows Zune Marketplace as well. So it's available pretty much anywhere that you can listen to content through your phone or other devices. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter @inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.